hello, and welcome to Pop Off, Sis! The show where we talk about life, current events, and, well, ourselves. I'm your co-host, Lydia. And I'm your co-host, Margot. Welcome to this week's episode.
Welcome back.
Welcome. We're live. We're on camera. We are in quarantine.
We are quarantining it up, but we are staying entertained because the drama just keeps coming, even though everybody's supposed to be indoors.
The tea does not stop when we do.
It does not stop, and thank goodness for this podcast where we can pop off about all the tea and inform all of you on what is happening.
Yes, and we have some hot tea to get into today. So let's just start with our segment so we can get to the tea.
Well, before we get to our roses, which we have some pretty great roses this week, I would just like to say we have a very special guest today. Not only is he a guest, but he is a chief legal expert. So please welcome our legal expert, Jake Maslavi.
Hi, everyone. I would like to make it a point that the things I say on this podcast have no actual importance and are just my opinion. I am not a legal expert.
So full of expertise. All right, here we go. So I think the most important rose of the week, nay, the year, is that somebody right here on this recording is graduating.
Who could it be?
I'm gonna cry. I'm actually gonna cry. This makes me feel really emotional.
Does it? No, don't cry. You gotta flip it. No, it's like, it's surreal. It's bittersweet. I know. It's a weird feeling. I've never worn a cap before. Like,
well, you're
drama and a graduation. Thanks. Why do I look like a bird beak or something? Yes. By the time everyone hears this, I will be officially graduated from the University of Maryland, College Park, with a BA in Communication, Public Relations specifically, and a minor in Spanish Business.
Woo! Yes! Yes, education! Yes, Cap! Yes, Lydia! Lydia, I would just like to say that in these 4 years of knowing you, I have seen you grow. I have seen you refrain from going out when all of us were making poor decisions to go out before exams. And I couldn't be more proud. And I'm going to miss you so much. And this is so emotional.
Don't get emotional. You know I have a heart of steel. Anyway, thank you. I know it's been a wild ride. And I'm so happy to have known you and from what we created from those 4 years in college. So, yeah, that's my rose, guys. So what is your... Oh, wait. Wrong side. That's like the biggest takeaway from college is that, oh my gosh, were you there in that circle freshman year when we did that?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm gonna cry. The last day of freshman year, we were in our dorm, and somehow we just kept doing these half-heart things to each other, and we did like one big one in a circle when we were leaving the dorms on the last day because we thought we'd never see each other again, even though it was just summertime. And wow, that was 3 years ago.
1, 2, 3.
Well, my rose is not nearly as exciting at all, unfortunately, but I did finish the semester, and so my rose for the week is that I've just been lazy as fuck, and it has been so nice. I've been rewatching some Gilmore Girls. Shout out to all my Gilmore Girls fans out there. I've been starting some new shows. I've been doing a lot of lounging, doing a little working out, and a lot of eating. And it's been glorious. I was stressed. I'm not stressed anymore, and it's nice. It's just nice. Jake, do you have a rose of the week?
I do, actually. Although it is a lesser version of Lydia's, I just finished my 1L first year of law school about half an hour ago.
And straight into the podcast. That's the
mic drop.
If there's any way to celebrate, it's in this podcast.
It's coming on here to pop off. You heard it here first. That's way to celebrate. We are proud of you, and we're even more proud to have you as our chief legal expert.
Yeah, exactly. We literally would be able to go to Jake for like anything. Like, we have a legal note.
We have a legal note, and
Unofficial.
Unofficial. And why having a chief legal expert is so important today is because the tea we are talking about today has got some contracts in it. It's got some money stuff. It's got some potential lawsuits going on.
This is the level of legal mumbo jumbo that I will be speaking as well.
And now we have some top advice and opinions and thoughts on this drama. So we better get into it. We have only 3 words to start off this tea. Call her daddy. Oh boy, now the tea is scalding today because what has been going on with this podcast, Call Her Daddy, is crazy, and we're going to get into it. But first, in case you don't know what Call Her Daddy is, because it just sounds like a couple of words strung together, I'm going to tell you. Well, Call Her Daddy is a podcast. It features 2 20-year-olds, Sophia Franklin, who is 28, and Alexandra, she goes by Alex Cooper, 26. And on this podcast, they are as raw and as blunt as one could possibly be. And they talk about their life in New York City, especially about their sex life in great detail. Great detail. So they have a lot of energy on their podcast, more than this, and you know, they talk about their blackouts, their nights out, what's been going on. They call it their, quote, uncensored real female locker room talk, end quote. So that is a little bit about what it's about. It's a bit controversial. If you followed Call Her Daddy before, they are very blunt, sometimes have been called out for being, you know, a little anti-feminist. Basically, they sell merch that says "degrade me."
Why?
And teenagers buy it. You know, they have some young listeners, so.
My expert testimony says they are really big role models to look up to.
I mean, who doesn't want to wear a t-shirt that says "degrade me" on it? I mean, as women.
Imagine, like, your father seeing his 12-year-old daughter, like, walk out of the house with the "degrade me" sweatshirt on?
Don't we all want to be degraded at the end of the day? Isn't that what it's all about?
Of course. I mean, what else could one possibly want? So, in terms of that, they're a bit controversial. Now, the 2 of them, Alex and Sophia, are best friends. They live, or were best friends up until a couple months ago. They live in New York on the Lower East Side together. Fun fact, when I was Instagram stalking one of them, I found that they frequent a bar that is about a block from where you live.
Current.
Wow.
Right there.
Whoa. That's cool. Is it a popular bar? Or like a nice one?
It's like, it's cute.
It's very popular. Kind of. It's fine. It's very good food.
Ooh.
It's good food. It gets quite crowded at happy hour, but it's not like anything particular. I mean, it's not a Ben's.
No, it gets to Ben's.
But
I think it gets to Ben's level.
Really?
You haven't seen it. You haven't
I
seen
guess.
it. No, it's like the people who would go to Ben's, like all the typical frat and sorority kids, but not just from College Park, from Michigan and Wisconsin and Indiana. They all live in Murray Hill, and this is their new bar. It's like their Kilroy's, well, yeah, you get the point.
Are you surprised that like these girls would go there?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was just shook because in my deep Instagram stalking, I was like,
You're like right here.
yeah.
It's because they fit with the Barstool
Are
culture.
you far from the Lower East Side?
No, it's right there.
Yeah, it's right.
Oh.
Are you technically in the Lower East Side?
No. We're like in between Gramercy and Murray Hill. The Lower East Side is like
Further.
10-ish blocks that way. Very close.
So
you're not even far from where they lived.
No, let's go bang on their door.
Just the drama.
What's going on? Tell us. Oh my god, and we could get a feature interview.
Oh my god, can you imagine?
That would blow us.
Can you imagine? We would literally, because they're number one. We're a number one spot podcast in the world, or like in the U.S. So we would
blow up with them. Well, speaking of them blowing up, when they started their podcast, it only took them a month to be discovered. Now, I was reading an article and it said something like 80% of podcasts are undiscovered or something like that, which is kind of a depressing.
It's kind of sad. Good
Well,
thing we love this.
You can look at that in a poor lighting, but 20% of podcasts get discovered. And I would think that you guys are in the top 20% of podcasts. So, mathematically, I'm not just a lawyer, but also a mathematician. Seems like you have good odds.
I mean, just listen to our Popsters about that one. Anyways, it's a hit podcast that is on the Barstool network. So they were discovered by Barstool and they work for Barstool. And they, like Lydia said, became the top rated female podcast on iTunes, which makes them the most successful Barstool podcast, because I'm sorry, I've never even heard of any of the other Barstool podcasts. I mean, I don't follow sports, but
Barstool is not your forte.
That's an expert opinion.
Getting roasted over here.
In case you guys couldn't tell from the Buccaneer conversation, Margot may not be into sports.
In case you guys need a reminder, she is still not into sports.
Maybe not. I can enjoy them from afar by seeing shirtless men.
If you watch, and if you watch like the big things, like the Super Bowl, World Series, that's something. You're into, the culture. But I was gonna say, I didn't even know Barstool had like a whole podcast section of their brand or whatever. So that tells you something that, like, Call Her Daddy put them on the map in terms of podcasts, I feel like.
Exactly. They have a bunch of them. They have like a whole podcasting studio, or like multiple ones. I think they have like a radio show even, like, but I mean, I've never heard about any of them.
To be honest, Barstool isn't really my forte either. But most of my guy friends tune into a bunch of their podcasts. They've been popular. Like their main demographic of college kids and post grads.
Their demographic, I will say, they do a good job in their demographic. Like my brother, he's 28 now, and he will still send Barstool posts. So they especially guys, I feel like they really speak to their audience.
Exactly. Yeah. Their demographic, they hit and target really well, but that's also why it seems like a foreign concept to you guys. Because
we're,
Well,
you are not their demographic.
Well, also Barstool, so if you don't know what Barstool is, I don't really know how to explain it, but they talk about sports on there. They also have Instagram pages for like every big university, especially the ones that have big popular sports teams, where they will talk about sports, but also mainly like post videos of college kids being really fucked up and doing really dumb things. So it's kind of this whole like college forever sports platform, and they have multiple different social medias, and they are based in New York City, but they I would say they're a very successful brand.
I think you hit the nail on the head. There you go.
Stop.
So we gotta give you the backstory leading up to all this drama that has happened with Call Her Daddy. So basically, the last episode of Call Her Daddy that had both Alex and Sophia in it, normal, no drama, was April 8th of this year, until Barstool Sports creator Dave Portnoy, who's known as El Presidente, they call him, he's just the head of everything Barstool. He posted on Call Her Daddy's podcast a new episode called Daddy Speaks on May 17th.
It is important to remember that in this episode that Dave posted, he is telling the narrative from his point of view, and though he starts off the episode going on about how he's, quote, honest to a fault and how unbiased he is in the matter, there are 3 key players in this game, and he is one of them. So his opinion is biased. It is. There are 3 sides. There's Alex's side, there's Sophia's side, and there's Barstool's side. And in this podcast, we are hearing Barstool's side. So when Call Her Daddy started, it only took a month for Dave to discover them, to discover the podcast of Alex and Sophia. It ended up being on his feed, and he reached out to Alex. Now, he says that in these beginning negotiations, when, Call Her Daddy was an unknown podcast, it didn't have many listeners, that he only did negotiations with Alex. And she said that she did all the editing herself, and she said that, in a deal with her and the podcast, that Sophia came with it, that they were, a dynamic duo, that was that. Dave and the girls came to an agreement with contracts that were 3 years long. This is the keynote of this first contract that they signed. Barstool wanted to own the intellectual property of Call Her Daddy. So that means they own the name. That means they own the podcast, like every episode. That means they own anything made with the name. That means the merch, the advertisements, anything to do with the podcast. If they own the intellectual property, they own it. It is theirs. And this was their leverage, because they're saying, we're putting money into you guys. We're putting money into Call Her Daddy, into your platform. We're giving you a much bigger listening base, or we're going to attempt to. And in exchange, we're going to own you. Like that, because Barstool, that was their leverage. That's what they could offer them. They were like, listen, we think you are talented, and we think that you guys could blow up, but you're not going to blow up without us. And, the contract happened in this way, where Barstool owns the intellectual property for 3 years. I think that this was the first mistake of the girls. It's really hard when you're starting off in an industry, or you start off a business and you want it to blow up really badly. Obviously, you want it to be your main income source, and you want it to do really well. You're not going to get many of these offers. And I'm sure the girls, when they got it, they were like, oh my God, it's Barstool. We don't have that many listeners. I think they were both working other jobs. It was this huge opportunity. However, signing over the intellectual property is signing over everything. Like that makes them immediately Barstool employees. And I think, they did work with lawyers on this first contract, but I think that I don't know how they would have done it, but they needed to be freelancers, and they needed to own their own property. Wait, 1 second. And the fact that they gave it away, which, to be fair, Barstool probably wouldn't have taken the deal if they couldn't own the intellectual property. But the fact that they gave it away for 3 years, now you might be thinking, what? It's only 3 years to grow your business. Well, in podcasts and anything entertainment, you could be a hit for a year, and then the next year, you're nothing anymore. And so it's really tricky, because 3 years, you can make it and break it within that time.
Well, you basically hit the 2 main points that I wanted to discuss, actually. signing over the intellectual property is controlling, but they wouldn't have gotten. Well, I'm not going to say they wouldn't have because nobody really knows in hindsight, but the likelihood of finding a fan base that Barstool can give you and the power and leverage that Barstool has is such an important use of why they signed over their IP. And without giving over the IP for a few years, they wouldn't really have been able to get a deal with them. That was a non-negotiable, as they call it in school. And I feel as though they made the right decision to sign it over in the sense that they wanted to get big, and they did. And while I think that the signing over for a few years can make or break because they might go out, I think you have to look at it from the perspective of I believe in my podcast rather than I'm worried it's going to go out at any time. Because you have a podcast and you're signing, it's only 3 years, we'll blow up and then we'll take over later on. You're not thinking, oh, what happens if we go down? What happens if we lose our fans? You got to believe in yourself. But the contract did have major consequences, and expert testimony from Margot will further enlighten you guys.
Yeah, I was going to just jump in and say, I think that also what Jake was saying about thinking about it in our perspective, it's the same thing. I mean, if Margot and I were presented with some deal of any kind, I think, especially with that first contract, you're eager, you're excited, so you're willing to do whatever. Like, yeah, of course I want to sign on with Barstool. They have a huge platform. I'll do whatever. IP, okay, I don't care about that. So you're very excited and you're not thinking as clearly. Even with lawyers, you might say, I know that's the smart thing to do, but we want to be famous, so this is what we're going to do. So you can kind of screw yourself over in the beginning, And I was reading an article about all this drama, and they even said a lot of times when you get your first contract, it usually always goes wrong because you're just not thinking about long-term consequences, and logically you're just thinking, how do I get that instant gratification?
Well, and I definitely agree, but the instant gratification did take them a long way.
True.
It did. I think it's, you can look at this the same way you look at a musician signing with a big record label, or Barstool's the record label, they're the musician. Like, Barstool has all the power in this situation, and it's very true. Like, when you're starting your creative endeavors, you just want to be big. Like, you want it to blow up, and you don't know the business side. You don't really understand. You're like, yeah, it's intellectual property, whatever, but that's actually everything. That's why you've heard like this Taylor Swift drama we were talking about, probably a couple months ago now, but with her record label, when she was signing her first contracts, when she was young, a lot of time young and new artists and new entertainers are taken advantage of. But that's because the companies who are hiring them, who are offering them contracts, know that they can get away with it because they have the power.
Yeah, I do agree with that. It just, as a record label and as whatever Barstool is, they are viewing their initial contract as giving a helping hand. Like, we are going to help you guys. It's not, we're taking a gamble on you. It's not really that you guys are gonna help us for sure. Odds are, when you sign a person to a music label, they're not going to be successful. It's very unlikely. They're taking a shot at them. But the key to keeping a relationship when you have a deal that favorable, if they do blow up, is theoretically they're making you so much money, you renegotiate the deal to keep the artist happy and be on good terms. Taylor Swift, you're doing so well. We have a really bad contract together, and we just want to reward you because we appreciate the business we're doing. It'll still probably be favorable to them, but not as much, and Taylor wouldn't feel slighted. But sadly, this is not reality.
So, Call Her Daddy, like we said, smash hit. Barstool's making bank off of them at this point. That first contract has been signed, sealed, delivered. Now we get to
I'm yours.
now we get to our second red flag, which is that after 6 months of the podcast being a hit, Alex comes into Dave's office by herself, and asks for a raise. She asks for more money. And he says yes. He gives her this money. Sophia did not get this same paycheck, and now Alex is making more money than Sophia, unbeknownst to Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are. We're at the end of year 1. Sophia and Alex are in talks about renegotiating their contracts because Alex and Sophia recognize they're valuable. We've held this podcast for a year and we're blowing up. We need more money. So Dave said he gets this email written from some lawyer saying that Alex and Sophia want to redo their contracts because they don't feel that they were properly represented when they signed the first one, and that they never would have signed over the IP had they known what that meant and what that entailed. So at the end of year 1, there was a money difference between Alex and Sophia at this point. Alex was making $506,000, $500,000, okay? Sophia was making $461,000. So what's going on with this renegotiation? What are we thinking, Jake?
So once again, I have no real legal opinion.
We know, but you do, but we know.
Yeah, but funnily enough, I did learn a decent amount of contracts related topic in my first year. And one of the big topics was about modification of contracts. And I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because I don't want to bore you guys about legal mumbo jumbo. But basically, there's this pre-existing duty rule when it comes to modifications.
Duty.
Yeah. Duty.
Margot and I would be in law school like you said, duty.
Believe it or not, we all do it too. We're human. We find duty funny. Anyways, the pre-existing duty rule. Laugh it up.
Is this duty DOODI or DUTY?
DUTY.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyways, this rule.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is DOODY even a word?
Yeah,
I
duty.
don't know.
That's the.
I think that's shit.
Funny. That's why it's funny.
That's the poo one.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought people just said that. I didn't know it was like a real, like in the English vocabulary, in the dictionary.
That was my law segment. Thank you guys for listening. Okay, but actually, this rule states that if you want to modify a contract, you need to give some sort of consideration in which, if you can't just say, I want more from the contract because I don't feel it's represented, you need to give up something in order to gain more from the contract, because you guys signed exactly, you guys are performing the exact deal that you signed for. So there's no real detriment to them. They're not giving anything up. So they can't just ask for more and say, I'm not going to perform the contract unless you get more. That would be a breach of contract in which Barstool could probably sue them. So Barstool and Alex and Sophia have an exact contract where they are all performing it the way it was supposed to be. Barstool can recognize that that Alex and Sophia are doing a lot for them and renegotiate, which it seems like was attempted, and that's what he can do, but he doesn't have to.
So what you're saying is that because they all signed the contract, everything is dandy, even though the girls want more, Barstool is under no obligation to renegotiate.
Yes. What Alex and Sophia's options are is attempt at a good faith negotiation, which Barstool could be nice about and apply, live out the contract and just wait it out, or breach the contract and just stop. And they will get sued, but if they think that's worth it to them, then that's fine. They just have to, because the IP, they can't really breach that. It's like, it's the IP. They don't own it for a little bit, but they could stop performing their end of the bargain, and Barstool won't have to pay them anymore. Those are their options. They don't have to actually renegotiate.
So does that mean that during this time period that they're not recording any episodes, they're not getting paid because they're breaching the contract?
Well, it depends on if Dave wants to pay them or not.
So in their new contracts, they're asking basically to double their salary. They want a $1 million guarantee. And they also want to become freelancers versus Barstool employees, which is kind of like has to do with the IP and all that stuff. So what do you think about this jump in salary, Margot?
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot of money. But I mean, you know, Dave is pretty blunt about the fact that Barstool is raking in a lot of cash from this podcast and from the merch and from the sales and the downloads and all of that stuff. You know, like I said earlier, I think that Alex and Sophia, you know, if they know more at the time to sign the contract, they should have signed on as freelancers in the first place. I don't think they really benefited from being Barstool employees, except for maybe like some healthcare benefits or things like that.
And a lot of fame.
Well, yes, but even if they were freelancers, they'd still be on the Barstool network.
Yeah, but Barstool wouldn't sign for them.
Right, they might not have. And the other thing that the girls were asking for was 50% of everything that Barstool did, like the ads and the merch. Now, this is interesting because at first when I heard that, I was like, well, why aren't they earning 50% anyways? It's their name, it's their brand. But then I thought about it, and I'm like, Barstool, that means that Barstool is the one, they're paying for all of the merch, for the production of all the merch. They're paying to put out all the advertisements, create all the advertisements. So actually, you know, Alex and Sophia are the talent, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have a hand in the merch or in the, I mean, they might help throw around the ideas of like, oh, this would be good to sell in the merch, but they're not producing it. It's not like they're Jeffree Star making the makeup in one of their own warehouses. You know what I mean? Like, and they don't even have the right to do that because they don't own the IP, because that's the last thing they're asking for in their contract is like, we want the full IP back. So this whole contract is essentially asking for everything. Like everything that Barstool has, they want it, except, you know, just doing 50% instead of 100% on all the ads and the merch. But they're asking for every single thing that they signed over, which is essentially everything's tied back to the IP. Right. And that's the main thing that they want back, because if they go somewhere else, well, Barstool has the IP, they can't be Call Her Daddy podcast. They have to change the name because they don't own the name.
Back to the contract.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys can tell, but they might be asking for a little bit too much.
You couldn't infer.
You don't say.
What an expert legal opinion. Well, Jake, you'd be right, because Dave was like, no, this is not happening.
Nope.
So Alex and Sophia were like, oh, word? Okay, we're going to start looking other places. So then Dave was like, oh, too much. Don't do that. So he came back to them with the offer that included a lot that they wanted, which is giving them the IP to the podcast. They were going to give them the merch, new contracts, completely, totally what they wanted. But Barstool has the rights to alcohol. So this means when the girls were to leave Call Her Daddy, Barstool would still own it, and the girls get 10%.
Sorry, they're alcohol?
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Question, Jake, because I was like, when I was listening to the podcast, I was like, what the fuck? I've never heard, I mean, I don't know why I would have heard of it, but I was like, they're alcohol. And I Googled it, and there's pretty much nothing but questions on Reddit about it. So I think that they got I don't know if it's a patent or the trademark or whatever it is for Call Her Daddy alcohol, but they haven't actually produced it yet. And doing some digging, I learned that actually when brands and branded people sell alcohol, they actually make a fuck ton of money off of these products. Like, alcohol apparently is a really big business in terms of like merch and that kind of sale. So Barstool was saying, you guys get 10% of the alcohol, but we get everything else. But yeah, and they pretty much came back to them and gave them everything they wanted besides like the $1 million guarantee.
Do we know what kind of alcohol is? I feel like that's the real question everyone wants to know.
Are we talking like premium top shelf? Are we talking like beer?
I mean, I think they got rights to it all. Whatever they want to do, they'll do it.
Does their patent specify what kind of alcohol it is? Like, I feel like they're not just gonna sell alcohol in general. Like, they're gonna have. I feel like if there's a patent about it, then they must have created a certain kind. Maybe. I don't know. I have never heard of this.
Our legal expert has not heard. I mean, Dave doesn't go into it. He doesn't say. He just says alcohol. And I think that's why there were so many questions on Reddit, because everyone was kind of like, what? What are they talking about?
So basically, when Dave comes back with this contract, the girls don't respond for a while. But then they finally responded saying that they wanted 90% of the alcohol. But then Dave sends Alex a text saying that he had never dealt with anyone as disloyal and greedy as the two of them.
He pissed.
He big pissed. So that takes us to why the girls stopped doing the podcast on April 8th. But with the timing of the coronavirus, he wanted
coronavirus.
I did kind of feel myself saying that, like, Cardi.
Coronavirus.
I have an update with the alcohol.
Basically, with the time of Corona happening, you know, things were slowing down for all businesses, and he was worried about the revenue coming in, so he wanted to control whatever profits they were still making at that point.
Oh, for sure.
No, now what's happening, Margot? Where are we now?
Well, I think we have some breaking news on the alcohol front.
Oh! Cheer, cheer, cheer! Okay.
This is just in. They have trademarked hard seltzer. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise to no one. Of course, they're making a daddy White Claw.
Yeah.
We knew it. We knew it too. We were over here like, maybe some tequila. No, they're just making another True Leaf.
We were hopeful. Can you blame us?
Wow.
That's fine. That's just like so typical though. I mean, when I hear that, I'm like, they're gonna make bank off of that.
Would have.
Well, yeah. So, yes, things are a shit show, essentially, at this point. When they stop doing the podcast, you know, Dave is pissed. Everybody's pissed at, you know, the girls are pissed at Barstool. Dave is pissed at them. The girls still want a better contract. And now Dave is concerned because he's like, like Lydia said, coronavirus is happening, and even though he claims, you know, he doesn't need them, Barstool's, he's been doing well for 17 years. He doesn't need, you know, he kind of goes on like a little jackass rant. But he's like, listen, coronavirus is happening. They're a podcast. They do it from home. They make a lot of money. I want to be able to do payroll. So essentially, he met up with the girls 3 weeks ago. And they did this on the roof of Dave's building, social distancing, full Corona geared up. They have this business meeting. So the girls finally admit, after months of denying it, that they have been looking around at other networks to see what other deals they could get. Because they wanted to make more money. They wanted to make more of what they thought was theirs. Dave tells them, he's straight up, he's like, if you guys try to leave, if you breach your contract, I'm gonna sue you. Like, that's just what's gonna happen. I will sue you. This is why I made the contract that I did. But then he cuts them a deal. He said he gives a $500,000 guarantee for each girl. So, you know, Alex made $506,000, Sophia made $461,000. He's saying, on top of, you know, you're going to get bonuses, you're going to have other opportunities to make money, but baseline, you're going to make $500,000.
Which technically is a pay decrease, a pay cut for Alex.
Alex. It is. But I mean, her 506,000 was with bonuses. So I don't know what the bonus is. He doesn't really talk about the bonuses, what they would look like, but it is a good, it's a fuck ton of money.
Yeah, either way, we'll take it. Hey, Dave, Margot, and Lydia, we'll sign on to Barstool.
We'll do it.
We don't need no IP.
Isn't the guarantee on top of what they were already making?
Oh, like, so would that mean an additional $500,000?
Yeah, that's how I, like, on top of everything I was already going on. That's how I took it.
I did not. I mean, if that's what that means, that's even more money. We're talking big dineros here, okay? So not only would they get that, they would get an increase in merch, or like the revenue of merch. It would go up to 7.5%. Now, Dave says that they were making millions of dollars in merch. So apparently this was supposed to make them big rich too. And with 18 months left on their 3-year contract, he said that he was willing to take off 6 months so they could leave in just 1 year. And after 1 year, as per the contract, they would get their IP back. They would get back their intellectual property. So they would be able to leave and go over and do whatever they wanted. The only thing Barstool was keeping was they still wanted to get 80% of alcohol.
In my head, seems like a good deal. We don't know a lot about the reality of it. This is just one man's perspective. But that seems like a generous offer.
Yeah, because if you think about it, for them, the two big things were IP and money, and both they're getting more of, so.
Both are satisfied, and with only 1 year left on their contract, they would be able to get their IP at the end of the year.
Right.
Which, honestly, a year isn't that long, especially when you're going to be making that amount of money already. And it would give them a year to create a new contract, to shop around. Like, they would have time to go to other places, say, hey, I have 12 months left on my contract. What do you want to do for me? So they could have had leverage. Mm-hmm. Apparently, when they went and they were offered this deal, they had another deal cut with someone else.
Of course, it could have just been easy, like, okay, all happy ending.
Okay, we'll take it. I mean, of course, he was being generous, allegedly, all right? Everything in this is alleged. We don't know. So...
You're learning.
I am indeed. Dave says that in this deal, he says in the podcast, he's like, Barstool got nothing, but that he just wanted to do it because of coronavirus. It would give him 1 year to still rack in some bills from the girls, still profit off them, in all honesty, and then they could go on their way. And like, he was quite clear that he didn't really want to necessarily do business with these girls anymore, but he was doing it because of the bills that they were making. So he gives this offer, and the girls don't take it. And he doesn't hear from them for a few days. And eventually, Alex calls Dave. And she says that Sophia refuses to do the deal. And that Alex is begging her to do it. Because she's like, we get everything we want. We're paid more. We're going to get the IP address in 1 year. It makes sense. It's stable. Now, here's another layer. Because this story is already so layered. But to add a cherry on top, Sophia's new boyfriend, who the two refer to as Suit in their podcast, if you've been on social media, there's been a lot of references to Suit. That is who that is. I didn't even write down his real name because they just kept saying Suit. So I was like, that's what I'm going to call him. He brings in lawyers, and he started acting as the girls' managers when they stopped recording, when they were, in this whole process of trying to renegotiate. And he had cut them a deal with this company called Wondery, where the podcast would be called The Fathers. Now, it would have to be called that because they can't use Call Her Daddy because they wouldn't get the IP because they'd be breaching the contract. And The Fathers is what the girls call their listening dates. So just like you are a Popsters, they're The Fathers.
It would be us going from Pop Off Sis to Popsters.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It'd be the equivalent.
I would rather be a popstar than a father any day.
We got our number one hype man over here.
Right here.
Soon to be attorney. Okay.
Soonish.
Just 2 years.
The irony is, Jake, you're going to be drafting our first contract when we make it big.
Oh,
Well, hopefully you guys make it big before I get that far.
Aww.
so sweet. Dave calls Sophia and he tells her that Alex called him. There's so much calling of each other, but essentially Alex called him and said, listen, Sophia won't do the deal. I really want to do it. She's got the boyfriend. He's going behind the back. You know, he's trying to do some shady shit. And after that deal that you offered us, which was insanely good, I want to do it. So Dave tells this to Sophia. Now, I don't know what their living situation is like because they are roommates. So are they not talking to each other at this point? I assume maybe Sophia went to stay with the suit, with her boyfriend. We don't know. But Dave is essentially like to Sophia, listen, if you want in on a contract, if you want to be in business with us, you have to say it now, or we're going ahead with Alex. We're going to make her own contract, and you just won't be involved. Well, it's a threat, but they don't hear back from Sophia. And then they restart negotiations with Alex. And in this new renegotiation, Alex was getting 75% of the intellectual property. She no longer wanted to do 50-50. She was like, Sophia doesn't want to do this anymore, so I think I've put in more, and I want to do 75%. So after the 75% renegotiation, the One Tree deal falls through because I'm assuming Alex doesn't, she's like, I don't want to do that anymore. I have this great deal. And Sophia comes back to Barstool, but Alex is like, no, you lost the 50-50. That's not happening anymore. So that's not good for the podcast. Barstool offers Sophia her own podcast on their network and $500,000 to start it, do it. She would be able to post her podcast on the Call Her Daddy feed so that it would still be seen by their fans. You know, she could start over. She could do it, you know, differently.
We promise the story is almost done, but the drama continues with Sophia's lawyers claiming that Barstool empowered Alex, you know, to be this big bad wolf that can go to the show on her own. And Barstool is gearing up to bring Alex back for her to Call Her Daddy by herself. So Dave, remember, Dave is the guy that owns Barstool. He threatens to keep the intellectual property and restart the podcast with completely new people, which is like crazy. So Free the Fathers became a campaign that was started by the girls, Alex and Sophia. They started this when the contracts weren't going their way, and they thought, oh shit, we might not even be involved with this at all anymore. So Sophia gets ready to sue Barstool and Alex. So now Sophia and Alex are enemies. Alex wants Barstool to defend her, which is all alleged. So it's a shit show. Everything's messed the fuck up. Barstool at this point is kind of profiting off the drama because they start selling Free the Father merch, and they start selling Cancel Suitman and Dump Him merch, which is all about Sophia's boyfriend. So it's like a dig directly at Sophia. So the New York Post has an insider that said that Alex and Sophia have now turned on each other, and they started arguing over who the real talent was, which we know in Dave's unbiased mind, but really biased mind, we know that he thinks that's Alex. As we come to the current conclusion where we're at right now, because, you know, things can change on a dime, but a close source to Sophia has said that she wants to continue the podcast with Alex 50-50. So like, there's a lot of flip-flopping going on, which complicates everything. They go back on what they said before, and then they change their mind again, so that's what makes it really messy. But then most recently, like a few days ago, Sophia finally broke her silence on her Instagram story, and she couldn't get into details because of current things happening, but basically she told us that Alex is totally out. She does not want to go 50-50 anymore, and that they indeed were shopping around to find a different network for Call Her Daddy. So they were going to try and keep Call Her Daddy as the name, keep everything the same, but just disaffiliate with Barstool. And she admitted that was shady. That was not the way to go about it. So yeah, and she admitted, like, this is basically where we are. It's a shit show.
I mean, listen,
Woo!
These girls joke all the time on, like, their show. They're like, oh, we're shit shows. We're such messes. But, like, right now, They really are a mess because they took a business, a podcast that was at the top, and they've made it to the point where it may no longer exist. They may no longer be affiliated with something that they created themselves. And at the end of the day, everybody in this situation is just greedy. Like, listen, Barstool took a lot in their first contract. They were greedy as fuck, but that's because they had the leverage to be. I don't condone it, but like I see what they were doing. They were like, we want to make money off these girls. In the renegotiations of the contracts, Alex and Sophia were also being quite greedy. I mean, the list of demands that they gave and the amount of offers they were given that met most of those demands, like, I don't know why they couldn't just say yes to one. I understand it is their baby. They felt like they deserved more money. We don't know how much money, you know, how much Call Her Daddy is valued at, but I'm sure it's valued at a shit ton, and that's why they were making all these demands. But at the end of the day, is it really worth losing your entire product over money? Like, you're each already making $500,000 grand a year. Like, I know if your podcast is making a bunch more than you want those profits, but Jesus Christ.
And that's 500,000 salary. That's not including the revenue from all the ads and the
Merch.
seltzer.
The seltzer.
The seltzer, that's not based on who listens, how many people listen, none of that.
They get a salary. They're salary employees, but their salaries a big salary.
And that's the dream. Like, I would love for podcasting to be my sole job, like my sole profession. If that could be enough to sustain me, can you imagine? $500,000, single, no children, like they're only 26, 28, like boyfriends, whatever, but that is like the steal. That's hitting the lottery, basically.
And all of this in 1 year. That's the other thing. It's been 1 year. I'm like, I understand you want to own what's yours, but you've been at this 1 year, like, you only had one more to go, where you're still making that mass amount of money. Like, you could buy yourself a big-ass penthouse apartment and just be happy for a year. And then once you move on to a new company after Barstool, like you end your contract with Barstool, you can move into an even bigger penthouse apartment and buy a yacht.
It's almost like more, you know, it makes sense if you think about it. It's better to just finish the contract and the drama will go away. Like, the drama's not worth, this drama could go on longer than the contract would have, you know, where this could have all been over. And I just think of that old adage of more money, more problems. Like, this is a clear example of that. And mixing business with pleasure does not always work out. 90% of the time, I feel like, does not work out. And they're seeing that.
I think that saying comes, I don't think that it's necessarily true that business and pleasure don't mix. I think most people can't handle the mix of business and pleasure. I think you two, for example, if you guys got big, you would not go through this. I don't think that money would get to your heads. I think you guys would be happy to be in the place where you were. That's the big difference. They never were happy about it. Their offer, from a legal standpoint, that was an offensive offer. It's a big part of negotiations to like offer a respectable amount, even though you want to go high, so the other party doesn't cut off the deal. And that's exactly what happened in my head. They offered some absurd amount where basically there would be no point of Barstool being even involved. So he was giving them the option, hey, I will renegotiate with you guys. And they essentially spit in his face about it. They were like, give us everything. We don't respect what you've done for us. Granted, he's also extremely greedy in the sense that he never really like cared about anything but the revenue streams. But as a big business owner, that's what happens in the end.
I think at the end of the day, you have to remember they started this podcast as friends. I read an article where it was like they literally met not long before they started the podcast at a music festival. They became best friends there. They started talking really openly about their sex life in a bar, and it started gathering crowds. And then everyone was like, you guys should do this. And these were strangers they had just met. They came back to New York, And, you know, from there, that's where everything started. Then they became roommates and best friends. They've lived together, and all of that might be gone now. It's just going to be like a bad story. I don't know. I mean, we don't know how this ends, but it's just sad because at the end of the day, even if they continue on different podcasts, if Sophia takes the deal where she can create a new podcast and Alex stays on Call Her Daddy by herself, their friendship is forever going to have this rift in it over money. And a lot of people are pointing fingers at Sophia's boyfriend because they think that he got this idea into her head that she should be making more and that he's like really greedy. And maybe he is, but Sophia also made the decision to listen to him. Like, he's not involved in their business. And it's sad because they were a success story and now they're a horror story.
Exactly. And it just comes down at the end of the day, you know, your passion needs to be there. No amount of money is going to make you happy. And you need to have communication. Constant communication is so important. I agree that I don't think it would happen with me and Margot because I think we are close enough to be honest with each other. I feel like honesty is such an important thing. And yeah, I want to know how this ends. To be continued.
People really undervalue their friendships when money gets involved. And I think it's something really sad that you watch repeated in history throughout. You may have seen it in person, through movies, through stories, through literally the history books. But they were a team. They were in it together. They built each other up. And after only a year, they decided, we hate each other because one of us wants more money than the other. And that's kind of sad because, like, that's like totally against the point of a team. They really did this together. It's not one or the other. And they're going to struggle to make it afterwards if they really do split up. They're going to have their side of the fans. The fathers are going to split up. That's the real heartbreak of the whole story. But they're never going to reach the same level because the podcast is about being a duo. It's not Margot or Lydia. It's Margot and Lydia. And I think the same thing goes for them. It's Alex and Sophia. And they don't realize what they're doing right now, but if they just were appreciative of the situation they were in instead of wanting more. Yeah, Dave could have gave more, but like he didn't have to, and they shouldn't turn on each other when something doesn't go their way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like, it's a sad story about money corrupting people's minds. And they made something really successul, and now it may never be the same. And this may be like their 1 year of glory. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. And in general, you know, we just thought it was an interesting story to tell you guys because we are, you know, two female friends doing a podcast together, and hopefully it will never be relatable. It will never be relatable, but the context is very familiar to us in terms of our identity. So it was very interesting to see this play out. And like we said, I just gotta keep watching, get the popcorn.
I know. Maybe there will be a part 2 update. I'm sure there's more tea to come. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, this drama has really distracted me a bit from coronavirus. So
it really has. Whoa.
If anything, it's done that. And now that we have popped off for a lengthy amount of time about this entire saga, it's time for us to pop off with some savage seconds. All right, y'all. We are popping off in 3, 2, 1. Okay, what I do not understand about my body is that for some reason, when I'm hungover, I am so unable to drink water. Water is your friend when you're hungover. Water's what's going to help you, but my body's like, no, don't give that to me. That does not feel good. Do not put that in me. Don't you dare put it near my lips, and I can't take it.
all these goddamn people in Central Park right now. The city is still deserted. New York City, the most popular and packed city in the world, is deserted. But Central Park is as if the coronavirus never happened. Go inside. This is the same as always.
Okay, 3 syllables, quarantine, okay? We're in quarantine, but I feel like I have no hours in the day. All I do all day is nothing, and then I still don't have enough time to do more nothing, like watch a show. What the fuck? I didn't even get what I wanted to say, but great.
That was so true.
It's accurate. It's accurate.
I feel that to a T, Lydia, because I'm like, I haven't done anything all day, but how is it already 10 p.m.?
Mm-hmm.
I know. It's like so frustrating, and then I look at the clock and it's like 6 p.m. every time I think it's 2 p.m.
We're gonna end after so much talking, so much deliberating, so much popping off with some calmness, some quiet, some nice quotes of the day. Lydia, kick us off.
Mine is all about taking risks because the time is now, and it says, and the day came when the risk it took to remain tight inside, the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And that's by Anais Nin. How about you, Margot? What do you have to enlighten us today?
Well, mine is a little ironic considering today's drama. All lasting business is built on friendship by Alfred Montapart.
Ooh, ain't that the truth? If we've learned nothing from today,
That indeed. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you to our wonderful legal expert, Jake Maslavi. Woo! I hope you all feel a little more educated today about all legal things, especially about this Call Her Daddy situation. I mean, I know you just have all the tea now. You have been informed. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to us ramble for about 2 hours.
Wow, that's a record.
It really is.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. Your legal expertise was very appreciated.
And we will see you guys in 2 weeks.
And that is our show.
Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at popoffsis.podcast and our personal accounts at Lydia__Parker
And at mtrouvé. Be sure to check out all of our episodes at popoffsis.wixsite.com/website. Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.